Welcome back to SAS Rugby Insight. In today's episode we have Neil de Kock with us, former Springbok, Saracens and Stormers scrum half. We're going to talk everything kicking game, different setups, strategies and hopefully some individual technique at the end. Neil, thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Corner.
Thanks for your
Good
time.
to be here.
I want to go straight into this. This is a stat from the Premiership. And basically what it's showing is the amount of box kicks on the x-axis and how many of those box kicks each team retained. And I would just like to hear your thoughts on it. First of all, why do you think Saracens is such an anomaly there on its own, and the amount of kicks? And then if you think there's any correlation between the amount of kicks, how many positions of those you retain, towards where you are on the log, or is it just a coincidence?
Corner, thanks, man. Listen, I think it's probably, this is more about the strategy that a team employs than success rates and in terms of where they are on the log. I think what it does say is that Saracens employ quite a thorough kicking game. They kick a lot more, as you can see there, than a lot of other teams. And I think that just comes from years of doing a similar thing. What it does tell me is that Saracens have very effective kickers, and they're happy to kick box kicks at any place in the field. So in order to, this is box kick specific. If you look at Exeter, for example, they're a team that would back themselves to take the ball through 100 phases, and not necessarily very comfortable to kick the ball out of their own zone. That being said, Saracens will employ a different strategy right up until their own 10 metre, where they'd look to box kick off 9 and look to retain possession. Quite a good outcome for Saracens, probably at about 20%. But equally, if you look at Exeter, if they're kicking 80 and they're retaining probably about 12 or so, it's not too bad either. So it's retaining possession, I think some teams employ it as a real weapon, this box kicking game, and others would use it less so.
For me, what stands out is definitely, even if you're Irish and you decide only to kick 100 times, or Worcester, if you only regain 5 kicks of that 100, that's a recipe for not getting results.
It is, and I suppose it's, this would highlight for a team to go and look why we're only winning 5% of our box kicks back, as opposed to 20% or almost 25% for some teams. And it could be a host of things. It could be the accuracy of the kick, which I mentioned earlier. It could be the effectiveness of that kick. It could be poor contesting. It could be the opposition are just better aerially. So what you'll find is, teams look at that. They might decide, listen, we might look to kick off 10 rather. And we might need to, try and find space in the backfield, or even kick it off the pitch if we can contest better at line-out time, rather than kick the ball 100 times and only win it back 5 times.
And that's why I put up this clip. I think it's 2013.
Yeah, 2014.
Yeah, 14. Yeah. So, if you don't mind, just talk us a bit through this. Is a 5-man, and what will people call a down and out?
Yeah, down and out. I think what you've highlighted there is the position of the scrum half. So if you think of where the pressure is going to come from, it's usually from the trams, from up the touchline when you are a right foot kicker. So you want to give yourself enough time and space to be able to execute that kick before a Claremont runner comes through. So what you did see there is Steve Borthwick, who's got the scrum cap on. If you can go back a little bit, he was at the back of the line out. He in fact ran around to fulfill that blocking role between him and number 2 Skulk Brits to protect the 9, myself, who was kicking at that stage. And then Mako Vunapola at the back of the line out was also using himself as a buffer for anyone coming through the line out to put pressure on.
It's a good buffer to have.
Yeah, it's a good, nice wide buffer to have. The delivery, very important as well. Now, teams will employ a different delivery at different times. Some teams might prefer to maul and see if they can win a penalty.
Okay.
Others would like to get the kick away, so if the maul goes stagnant or if it does collapse, it makes that kick a little bit more difficult. So if you have a dominant line out, exactly, which makes things a little bit trickier for a 9. However, in this instance, the importance of your supporters in allowing to have your jumper free his arms and get that delivery away is very important. And then a good solid
so
hard
you're talking about
pass.
This lifter
Yeah.
right here, not trapping his arms.
That's right. Now I'm not a line-out specialist, but my understanding is, just create a buffer and be really tight to the jumper to not allow any arms or hands to come through or over to knock that ball down or grab an arm of your jumper. And then again, your body, your chest for the 9 is almost parallel, almost 45 degrees to the touchline, and ready to get into a good position to kick.
Okay. I've just highlighted this part as well. We'll talk a bit later about individual kicking technique, but what I do pick up immediately is you're quite tall. You don't sort of hinge or sit down on your kicking leg. Is that a real focus point for you when you're box kicking?
It is, yeah. It's almost trying to finish high on the balls of your feet, so to speak. So you're not falling backwards. In this kick specifically, probably fell back a little bit. And you want to keep your chest quite high and your levers, your legs, you don't want to have them bent. You want to have straight levers, kicking through the ball as high as you can, and really trying to push that ball out away from your body and have that consistent ball drop where the ball is dropping almost vertically, maybe a little bit, off vertical.
Actually, do have a ball off, if you don't mind. So
I suppose if you're calling vertically, as close to vertical as possible. Some kickers like to shape it a little bit back and start to hit it in that bottom third of the ball and try and find that sweet spot. And then, as I said, kicking through the ball and obviously keeping your head down and not trying to fall back onto your heels.
It makes a lot of sense. And the distance, does that vary? If you want to kick it a bit shorter, do you kick it at a different angle, or what would the process be?
Not particularly. It's quite a similar angle. If normal box kicks, some guys distance-wise would be 30 meters, some might be a little bit further, a little bit shorter, depending on how much power you're putting through it. But in an ideal world, at this part of the field, you're looking to have contestable kicks to put them under pressure. You'll see with this kick's probably a little bit deep, but it still puts the catcher under a little bit of pressure, knowing that he's going to get hit ball and all as he takes the ball.
Yeah, we just highlighted Billy there because he spoke about his role in terms of not overcommitting and getting into the line for the second wave of pressure.
Yeah, so the whole idea is first prize to win the ball back and to win possession back. Second prize is to create chaos for the opposition. And I think it does. The ball spills. Billy Vunipola has a look at that ruck time and he realizes that he's not going to chase a lost cause. He'd rather give us an extra man in the defensive line. And if you look at Owen Farrell that you highlighted there, he's having a look to see what Clermont are looking to do next. And he can spot and he can anticipate that the only option they really have is Brock James in the pocket. And there's not a lot of option outside him. So he's going to look to kick. So in an ideal world, if I can pause you there, had we reversed this and had we at Saracens received that ball, I think what you would have found is if you look at all the Clermont guys off their feet and guys still returning to that ruck, I think we would have slowed that down instead of rushing the ball out. Now it's quite early in the game, it's 7 minutes. There's a lot of energy from everybody. So I think what we would have done is probably set up a ruck closer to that touchline and look to kick the ball back on the opposition, such as the strategy that we employed at that time.
I've heard you spoke about kicking on your terms as well. Would that be an example where you want to kick, but now you just slow it down, get the right people on their feet?
Yeah, absolutely, because you talk about kicking on your terms. This is definitely not on Clermont's terms. If you see Brock James, he kicks this ball, he kicks it straight down Alex Good's throat. He gets over the halfway line and it actually results in a brilliant counter-attack, and I think we might have scored from that. Whereas if Morgan Parra had potentially slowed this down, had said, okay, well listen, we're chasing a lost cause here. Let's kick on our terms. Let's get the right guys on their feet. Let's set up a proper base.
And if you say right guys, you mean good chasers?
Your best chasers. So get the right guys on their feet. So you don't want your type 5 being in the front line, chasing a kick downfield, So, and that's not the case here, but there are far too many Clermont guys tied up in one little area.
Yeah, it's a real numbers game at this moment. There's about 6 Clermont guys.
And I think there's 1 or 2, I think it might have been Ashton and Jock Berger off their feet.
And we'll get to Crusaders as well. And I draw this clip up to just show the similarities again from the 9. I thought he's very economical, if you can call it that, in his approach. He's already on that 45 angle you spoke about, and he's sort of got his feet sorted out.
Yeah, it's very similar. He's given his jumper again a target, and he can pull the trigger quite quickly there. So by the time from when he catches the ball and kicks, it is a very quick transition.
Would that be something you train during the week, or in pre-season just have a conversation with the locks and in terms of the delivery?
Yeah, absolutely. So what nines should look to do is almost when there are some line-out sessions, that they go and join those line-out sessions, and that they practice that they complete the line-out, that they do some deliveries, whether it be down and out, off the top, or even sometimes you'll have the hooker come in and rip and almost pass it back to the nine. So.
And there might be some variations within the line-out as well. If the pod in front is blocked, it might go in the middle.
That's right. And it's important for nines to understand that and know where that ball's going to be delivered.
Again, the lifter is not getting in the way of the delivery. There's a good block by, I think it's Whitelock.
Yeah.
And the hooker is also taking up that front pod.
Yeah, similarly to that Saracens line that you showed, all the blockers are in place, they're in good positions. The nine has put himself in the best position possible to allow him to get that kick away without too much pressure. What I did like about the Crusaders here is that it almost looked like there was an option to run. There's Sevu Reece, who was on the open side, and then at the last minute came around the short side to run. He probably missed the jump by a second or two, because I would have preferred to see a winger. That was a perfectly weighted kick. You can see there he's probably just 5 meters too deep. Had he been parallel with that kicker, I think he would have got up in the air. But even that being said, the opposition winger sensed that there was a lot of pressure coming, spilled the ball, and the Crusaders do what they do best. In disorganization, they counter-attack and they hurt teams.
I think it's Sevu Reece again. He is all the way over on the opposite touchline. And although it's a kicking play, box kick call, is that just to give options for that cross kick, or?
I think so. I think it's a tactic that the Crusaders employ quite often. That they tell that open side winger, get to the touchline. And I'm not a fullback. I never played fullback, but what I would like to think is that the opposition fullback, it just makes him hedge his bets that he cannot favour one side, that he's got a lot of ground to cover. Had Sevu Reece been very narrow, he could probably favour his blindside winger here on the short side. But now he's got Sevu Reece on that far side. He needs to make sure that he can support his open side winger for that cross kick.
And if Sevu Reece is, like you say, a bit closer here, you might have the open side wing dropping a bit, going half-half, which allows the fullback to come over. So it's a good way of isolating that wing if you want a box kick onto him.
Absolutely. Yeah, so my thinking here is that the Crusaders are very flat if you look at their backline. So it is a kicking play. However, they've opted to go for the maul. And as you mentioned, if they get some ascendancy, there is an opportunity to play. So the winger in the boot, if you see him in the boot, the nine's cue, and for all the nines here, the Crusaders nine.
There's a back view,
That's right. The Crusaders nine is looking at these two pillars who are standing outside of the maul. And particularly the guy on the short side. If he hits in, there's an opportunity to attack down the blind side with his winger, and the winger's looking at that cue as well. However, here you can see on the open side for the Blues, they've got a lot of defenders out, so to run up Muggs Alley there makes no sense. You don't want your Crusaders tend to run into Muggs
Fly-off is just giving the call in there that he doesn't want the ball. There's no.
That's right, and if you go back one spot there, you can see the 12 isn't really interested there as well. So they've decided, listen, we're not getting any ascendancy in the maul, so let's go aerial. Sits back a little on that ball, doesn't go too far, but again, we always, that old cliche that every kick is a good kick, and the chase and the contest is always very important, and Bridge does really well to win this back.
Switching to the World Cup, if you can talk us through a bit more about the ruck and the setup.
Yeah, I think you see Aaron Smith has decided that the tactic here is to go aerial. They've won a good kickoff, and you talk about pucking the trankie. It comes back to the point you made earlier about kicking on your own terms. So Aaron Smith is looking to get some guys on their feet and get his protector, his blockers in place, so as to keep the likes of Marks and Ketzoff away from his kicking foot. You'll see number 2 and then number 3 comes into position. And over here with the right-footed 9, kick over his shoulder, you want your blocker, the guy who's lengthening the ruck, to have his left foot back. So you can almost be as far as possible from that pressure zone, from the Marks, coming onto his right foot. So try and distance yourself as far away from Marks as you can.
Okay, so just to reiterate what you're saying, so Coles joins, he sticks out his left leg,
yes,
just to be further away again from where the pressure is going.
Correct.
If he had his right foot back, maybe it was there at the cursor. It was just a great opportunity.
And he also feels that he still needs another block in place, so he's called his 3 to come around and to provide that extra protection as well. And you can see Aaron Smith, again, looking to kick on his own terms. And if you look at the work that Kitsoff does, this is the kind of thing that's done on the training pitch as well. You're pushing, pulling. What he's doing here is he's trying to shorten that ruck.
Yeah.
So it's quicker, or closer rather, for Marks to get to the kicking foot of Aaron Smith. And just being disruptive. So Smith will get that ball back into a position that he's comfortable with, but Marks, for all the guys who look to pressure a 9 when he's kicking, the eye has got to be on the ball. So as soon as that ball gets lifted off the ground is your cue to go and shoot for that charge down.
Because then technically the ball is out.
Technically the ball is out. If you're looking at a 9's foot or his hands, you know, a lot of 9s like to dummy and pretend they're going to kick, and then they get caught offside or they miss the jump. The important thing there is to always keep your eye on the ball, and as soon as that ball gets lifted, that you can go.
Tell me a bit about the technique, because again, he also looked very economical, one step and it's away.
Yeah, as mentioned, you know, you almost want to push that ball out away from your body, looking at that good ball drop, which he has there.
Yeah.
If we talk about his right foot, if you go back a little bit, it's almost his pivot foot. So you don't want to be stepping with that right foot and then stepping in, because it slows the whole process down. So if you can see his right foot there that's pointed up, he almost wants to pivot on that foot without moving it too much. Otherwise it slows the whole process down.
So taking an extra step will just allow Marks.
Absolutely, it's just that extra split second, and it's you know, something that 9s have got to be aware of, that they're just pivoting. And then again, he finishes pretty high and he pushes the ball away from his body, and he gets a decent kick away. Marks does very well, and it's just that perception of pressure just for a 9.
Catching him in his eye, there's somebody here.
Catching him in his eye line, which forces a 9 to potentially rush a kick and underkick it or slice it or overkick it. And it's amazing what that little bit of pressure does.
If anything, would you agree that he sits back a little bit? Yeah,
I'd say he sits back a little bit, and you can probably see it in the result of the ball. It's just a little bit short, you know, and they do end up, I think, winning this back. And I think they end up scoring from it.
Yes, so again, defensively, I mean, this is one of the very few tries we actually conceded in the World Cup, but just the illustration as to what it does for the defense, or then if you lose the ball, that aerial contest, very disorganized, very much out of shape here.
Yeah, there's not many teams that can do, you know, what the All Blacks did here, you know, and they make something out of nothing. I think the Springboks up to that point would have been very happy with that result. But again, it's, you know, you're winning possession back, and the ball is spilt, and it creates a bit of chaos, and that's what can happen to you if you're playing against a team who can counter like that.
But again, just maybe another reason why teams would employ that strategy against a very strong defensive team. There's no sense in trying to put up a few phases in your own 22. Whereas if you can get it in the air, get them disorganized, that's a great way of attacking a strong defense. Yeah,
there's always this philosophy, you know, if you can picture the rugby field, in your own third, it's about conserving energy, particularly against strong opposition and strong defensive opposition. You don't want to take the ball through too many phases, tire yourself out, and then when you come to, you know, the attacking zone, that you're off your feet. You're talking about managing your energy in that middle third, when to kick, when to run, when to pass, you know, and making the right decision at the right time. And for that, you need people who understand the game and good generals. And then in that top third in the opposition, almost close to the opposition 22, and that's utilizing your energy. So that energy that you've conserved and managed in those 2/3 of the field, you then come alive when you have the opportunity to attack, when you get close to the opposition.
That would make sense for a team like Exeter, for example. If they a bit more ball in hand, go through the phases a bit more, then maybe they don't want a box kick after putting up phases, because then they're tired. They might go more corners or more, put the teams under pressure where they can go back to the line out, and then from there,
absolutely
more.
And it's you know, one strategy is not necessarily the right strategy. You know, it depends, I think, largely on personnel and how you want to coach and how you want to play. You know, Saracens play a lot differently to Exeter, and yet both those teams in the Premiership have been very successful over the last couple of years. Equally so, you look at international rugby, there's teams who play differently, but who are just as successful as the other.
I guess at school level, that's where you really have to look at what type of players do you have. If you don't have a 9 that's really comfortable with box kicking, maybe you just change your strategy, kick more from 10, maybe then look to kick to the corners a bit more, or maybe go through the phases a bit more.
Yeah, I think it's very personnel driven, definitely.
Yeah. One from the Springboks. Interesting, this is the first kickoff of the match, and New Zealand, they go for this middle of the field kick, which you don't see often.
If you just go back, I think just one thing to point out is the work of the kick protection for Willie Leroux, allowing him to go up without too much contest from the All Blacks. There's some good block runners.
Some Peter Steff and them, look how they sprint towards the ball.
They're jogging back, and I think it's Am and Peter Steff who do a wonderful job there for blocking those All Blacks getting to Willie, which allows him to have a clean take of that ball. And
it also allows a lot of players around the ball.
That's right, yeah. So if that ball does spill, we always spoke about the crumbs, that they're there, they're ready, they will anticipate any ball that gets spilled, and they'll retain possession like that.
So this is maybe a good example what we talk about in terms of the kickers. Faf being a lefty, maybe for Saracens or for more box kicking approach team, you might put up another ruck towards the touchline. Yeah,
if you're looking to kick off 9, if that's your strategy, your 9 would probably look to get much closer to the touchline. He would probably go to the top of the screen here towards the left touchline. It's a bit easier for a left-footed 9 to kick at the left touchline. So he'd probably set up 1 or 2 phases, get the right people, as we said, on their feet and look to box kick. But if what you saw there, for all the 9s out there watching as well, he had to make sure if that ball was taken back into the 22 or if it was outside the 22. So he spoke to the ref, which is great. It shows he's alert 10 seconds into the game. He's switched on. And then looking back 2 forwards, they could potentially have set that up into another ruck. So the All Blacks are a little bit in 2 minds, but they're happy to go back to Pollard, who can kick the ball 60 meters, with a good chase. Interestingly here, if you go back a little bit, is that now maybe it's because the energy levels are so high, but you'll see Faf de Klerk in the front line there, which you normally find a 9 looking to be that second line of defense for any chips or grubbers coming through. And Bowden Barrett picks it up very quickly. He spots some space in behind, but the Springboks were alert to it and did very well to retain that ball. But again, just a little bit of chaos, but the Springboks, I think, reacted very well here early in the game.
Again, if you have a lock and a prop cleaning this ruck, and with the 8 that did the carry, and especially Dwayne, who plays back a lot more, you'll be more than happy to kick off this ruck, because now you have all your loosies and your centres. Yeah, and again, between, I think, Faf and Andre Pollard, they realised that. We spoke about the right people on their feet. And Faf, as you can see, looking back to communicate this, realises this is an awesome platform to kick off. It's early in the game, we're right up against the touchline. Marks knows his role, you can see he knows his role. He's come in to provide protection and lengthen that ruck a little bit for Faf, for him to get that ball away. But again, gets a very good kick away, and it's a fantastic contest in the air. The All Blacks retain it, but again, it just puts them under pressure. And you see the Springboks kits off again quickly onto that ball. And again, all the All Blacks are coming back under pressure. And if you look at Marks again, we talk about contributions in a game. Now, I know we're only 40 seconds into the game. But in terms of being switched on and knowing his role, he's come in, he's lengthened the ruck for Faf de Klerk, he's then sprinted up and he supported Kitshoff, who was on that ball, to win a penalty. It was fantastic work from him as well. But a great example, I think, of retaining possession, the effectiveness of a good kicking game, people knowing their roles. And no more so than in an example like this. And I think this might have been 3 points early in the game. And it ties in a bit to what you say about preserving their energy. They went 1 phase, kicked, and they got a lot of energy off of this. If you win a penalty by, you kick it 3-0, 40 seconds. That really lifts the team.
The kicking game is an interesting thing, because I think a lot of coaches, they talk about work rate, and they talk about we need to work hard. And I think a kicking strategy and a kicking game, when employed, even when you don't have the ball, is a perfect example of how hard your team is working. And this can be monitored. And that was always a selling point in the teams that I played in, is that let's see how hard you chase a kick downfield. Let's see how hard you contest or how quickly you get back on your feet, when the opposition have won that ball, and get into line and get off the line with that second phase. So it is a great measure, I think, your kicking strategy and your kicking game of how hard your team are working off the ball.
Would that have been something the management would highlight during the week, or really praise the players in terms of you doing well at this, to encourage them to do more of that?
I think so. I think if you use Marks as the example I just used, that for me would get a huge mention in that team meeting on the Monday when you have your review. Is that, look how well he fulfilled his role there. He came in, he understood that Faf was going to kick. He came in, he provided protection, and then he busted his gut to get to the next ruck and win a turnover. Now, a lot of people out there wouldn't necessarily see that, but internally, those are the kind of things that you want to reward and that you want to highlight, because I think it inspires guys to work so much harder off the ball and to make a difference and a contribution.
I can imagine that is something you can sort of add to your game or take your game to the next level, where for Kitsoff, for example, is a great scrummager, ball carrier, but that is just something that can maybe separate him from other props, that kick chase.
Yeah, and we saw him in the previous clip, I think, where he was pulling and pushing that ruck. And that's his role, and he clearly knows. He clearly knows what his role is, and if he can just disrupt one ruck in a game which causes a poor kick from the opposition 9, which results in a counter and 3 points or 5 or 7 points, then he's done his job, apart from what he does.
One penalty like that, I think it was the semi-final, Wales, it won you the semi-final, probably won you the World Cup.
That's it. And again, it's practice and understanding your role, and this is clearly, you use the Springboks, it's clearly a team that's coached incredibly well, and everybody knows their role. So it's and it comes with consistent training and obviously having the right guys within the team. Obviously a lot more challenging at school level because there's a lot of change and there's a lot of new players, but ultimately the strategy and the way you coach remains quite similar.
Yeah, that's back to the first stat, but then as a wrap for me, what I took out of the session is be clear on your strategy. Have that buy-in with your personnel, and on a pro level you might look for those type of players. If I think this is what's going to make us successful, or this is where the game is going, I need to go look for those players for box kicking 9s, for example. If I want to employ that strategy, I must make sure my recruitment fits that mold.
If I use Saracens, my reference point because of spending quite a bit of time there, but they had a strategy and I think they picked the personnel to fit that strategy. We wanted to kick off 9. We kicked 80% of our exits were off 9, so we needed 9s who could kick well. So if you look at the likes of Wigglesworth and Spencer, they're fantastic kicking 9s, who are incredibly accurate, probably the most accurate in the league. And you go and you look for them and you source them. Outside of that, at school level, I think you've got to lay the foundation, and you need a specific or certain strategy, but you must be able to adapt owing to who is playing week in and week out, because it might change quite a lot.
Similar for the wingers, I guess. If you look at a guy like Liam Williams, recruited by Saracens, he's great in the air, and it just ties in again with their whole strategy.
Yeah, good decision maker, brilliant aerially, and he's got a bit of X factor. So,
but I will say at school level, even if you don't think you have that personnel per se, there's no reason why you can't in a pre-season just make sure those skills get extra attention for like even trying to develop that player.
Absolutely. I mean, it never stops. Even at a professional level, you'll see the likes of the Liam Williams and the Alex Goods and Sean Maitland's going up and practicing aerially every day of training, just for 5 minutes, either before the training session or after training session, taking their 9 with them, and while the 9 box kicks, asks the coach to stand with a tackle bag and getting up and either tapping the ball back or actually trying to win it or even catch it above their heads. They continue training it.
And really get that sort of interventions in, even if it's 5 minutes every day, rather than once in 2 weeks.
Absolutely.
And then the second thing I got out of this is really have your team strategy clear. So even if you're a blocker, even make sure you know the calls, make sure you know your role. Even something like an open side winger pulling out the 15, be very clear for everyone what's their role and where you want to execute
Yeah.
where on the field?
Yeah, I think it's role clarity, you know, and I'm appreciative of the fact at school level you're not going to necessarily kick as much as what you would at professional level. But that being said, I think there is a clear strategy just, you know, around your kick chase that when you do kick, and ideally
Who's on the feet, who's up there? Yeah.
exactly, you know, and who you want next to the ruck as opposed to who you want out wide, who you want in that front chase line, you know, and just understanding those little complexities. And once you get that in place, then, you know, obviously we want to encourage schools to play, you know, play as much as you can and attack. But there will be times that you look to exit and you look to kick. Yeah.
And that brings me to the last point that I find really interesting is how you preserve that energy. Just bear in mind that if you've gone through 8, 9, 10 phases on attack, now you decide to kick, it might just keep in mind what type of kick you want to do there.
Yeah.
Maybe if you're still in your 22, you'd rather go out, just catch your breather, now to go contestable again and have to defend for. So just be really clear and, or maybe just keep in mind in terms of that energy levels.
Yeah, I think so. If you ask the tight five, they'll definitely say, please kick the ball off the pitch.
Yeah.
If you ask the other guys, they might say contestable. But yeah, it's exactly that. And again, it comes down to your decision makers on the pitch, you know, your 9s, your 10s, your 15s, you know, to gauge the energy, you know, of your teammates and particularly of your pack. You know, if you've played 13 phases and you've gone nowhere, that, you know, kicking the ball off the pitch is probably going to be the best option.
And that ties in nicely with what you said, kicking on your terms. So if you slow it down, then the 9 and 10, they can sort of reassess the situation, just have a bit of a think on what's best to do here.
Absolutely, yeah. Spot on.
Happy days. Thanks,
Cool.
Niles.
No problem.
Really
Thank
enjoyed
you,
that.
Connor.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Ciao.